She accepted us $5 million for one night, but the CEO wanted her heart forever. The glossy elevator doors of Sterling Enterprises reflected Everly Bennett's determined expression as she adjusted her navy blazer one last time. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "Baby girl, sometimes the hardest fights are the ones we choose for ourselves." At 28, those words had become her armor, especially on days like today, when she had to face people who thought everything and everyone had a price tag. The social services budget cuts had hit her department hard. 3 months of sleepless nights, endless grant applications, and desperate fundraising hadn't been enough. The community center project she'd poured her heart into was hanging by a thread, and with it, the futures of dozens of children who needed a safe space after school. The elevator chimed at the 45th floor, and Everly stepped into a world that screamed old money and new power. The marble floors gleamed like mirrors, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a vertigo-inducing view of Brooklyn Bridge in the distance. Her home borough looked different from up here. Smaller, more distant, like a painting rather than the vibrant, breathing neighborhood where she'd grown up. Miss Bennett, a sleek assistant with perfect posture, approached her. "Mr. Sterling will see you now." Following the assistant through a maze of glass and steel, Everly caught fragments of her reflection. Her corkscrew curls were perfectly arranged in a professional updo, and her minimal makeup highlighted her warm brown eyes and high cheekbones. She looked put together, confident, everything she needed to be to convince one more potential donor to save her project. The assistant opened a heavy wooden door, and Everly's heart skipped a beat. Lysander Sterling stood at the window, his tall frame cutting an imposing silhouette against the Manhattan skyline. At 6'2", he dominated the space not just physically but with an aura of absolute control. When he turned, his grey-blue eyes assessed her with the precision of a master chess player evaluating his next move. "Ms. Bennett." His voice was deep, cultured, with just enough warmth to be polite but not enough to be welcoming. "Please, have a seat." The Tom Ford Oud Wood cologne reached her before she'd taken 3 steps into the room. It was sophisticated, expensive, and somehow both inviting and intimidating, just like its wearer. Everly took the offered seat, noting how his custom Tom Ford suit matched the steely determination in his eyes. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for meeting with me. I understand your time is valuable." $5 million. Everly blinked, her carefully prepared pitch dying on her lips. "I'm sorry." Lysander Sterling walked around his massive desk, each movement deliberate and graceful. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, a nervous tell she'd notice many times in the future, and sat down across from her. $5 million, he repeated, his voice steady. "That's my offer. Not for your community center project, Ms. Bennett. For you." The room suddenly felt too warm, too small. Everly's fingers tightened on her portfolio. "I don't understand." "It's quite simple." He leaned back, studying her with those unnerving eyes. "I need a companion for the Metropolitan Museum's annual gala next month. Someone intelligent, beautiful, and most importantly, genuine. Someone who won't raise eyebrows or question marks among my more traditional investors." A laugh bubbled up in Everly's throat, sharp, incredulous. "Mr. Sterling, I'm a social worker, not an escort." "I'm not looking for an escort." His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, interest. "I'm looking for a business arrangement. One evening. No romantic expectations, no strings attached. Just your presence, your conversation, and your discretion." Everly stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I came here to discuss funding for a youth program that could change lives, not to— $5 million could change a lot of lives, Miss Bennett." His voice was soft now, almost hypnotic. "How many children could your center help with that kind of funding? How many families could benefit? All for one evening of your time." The worst part was, he was right. $5 million would not only save her current project, but could fund expansion plans she'd only dreamed about. After-school programs, counseling services, job training for parents, everything she'd fought for over the past 5 years. Why me? The question came out before she could stop it. Lysander stood, walking to a cabinet where a crystal decanter caught the afternoon light. "Because you're real." He poured himself a measure of amber liquid. "My world is full of people playing parts, Ms. Bennett. You walk in here straight from the trenches of social work, wearing your convictions like armor. That kind of authenticity is rare. And expensive, apparently." The words tasted bitter in her mouth. He smiled then, a small, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. Everything has a price. The question is whether we're willing to pay it. He gestured to the decanter. Can I drink? No, thank you. Everly gathered her belongings, trying to ignore how her hands shook slightly. Mr. Sterling, I appreciate your unique offer, but I'm afraid I'll have to decline. She was almost at the door when his voice stopped her. The children whose futures you're fighting for, do they care about your pride, Mrs. Bennet? Everly's hand froze on the doorknob. The scent of her Coco Mademoiselle perfume mingled with his oud wood in the air between them, creating an oddly intimate atmosphere she hadn't noticed before. Think about it, he continued. You have until Friday to decide. After that, I'll need to make other arrangements. She didn't turn around, didn't trust herself to look at him again. Goodbye, Mr. Sterling. The door closed behind her with a soft click, but Everly's heart thundered in her chest all the way down to the lobby. Outside, the spring air hit her face like a wake-up call. She walked 3 blocks before her legs stopped shaking enough to hail a cab. That evening, in her small Brooklyn apartment, Everly sat at her window seat, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and pink. Her mother's old jazz collection played softly in the background. Miles Davis tonight, because she needed something to soothe her soul. She pulled out her worn leather journal, a habit she'd maintained since college. The blank page stared back at her, waiting for her to make sense of the day's events. $5 million, she whispered to the empty room, the numbers feeling surreal on her tongue. Pride or purpose? Principles or pragmatism? The questions swirled in her mind as she watched the city lights blink to life, one by one, like stars being born in an urban sky. She had until Friday to decide, but somewhere deep inside, past all her carefully constructed walls of principle and propriety, Everly Bennet already knew what her answer would be. The question wasn't whether she would accept Lysander Sterling's offer. The question was what it would cost her, not in dollars, but in pieces of her soul. Thunder rolled across the Brooklyn sky as Everly stared at her laptop screen, the budget spreadsheet blurring before her tired eyes. 3 days had passed since Lysander Sterling's proposition, and she'd buried herself in work, trying to find alternative solutions. But the numbers didn't lie. Without major funding, the community center would never open its doors. A knock on her office door startled her. "Come in," she called, quickly wiping away a stray tear. "Girl, you look like you haven't slept in days." Monica Rodriguez, her closest friend and fellow social worker, walked in carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. Her bright yellow dress contrasted sharply with the gloomy weather outside. "Spill it. What's eating you?" Everly accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." Monica perched on the edge of the desk, her dark eyes concerned. "Is this about the Sterling meeting? Did that Silver Spoon CEO shut us down?" "Not exactly." Everly took a deep breath, the coffee warming her hands. "He offered me $5 million. Monica's eyebrows shot up. "That's amazing. Why do you look like someone died?" "Because it's not for the center, at least not directly." Everly set down her cup and stood, pacing to the window. Below, children played basketball in the community court, undeterred by the threatening weather. "He wants me to be his date for some fancy gala." "Hold up!" Monica's coffee cup clattered against the desk. "Lysander Sterling, the most eligible bachelor in New York, offered you $5 million to be his arm candy. It's not like that. He says it's strictly business. He needs someone genuine to impress his investors." Everly turned back to her friend. "But it feels wrong, Monica. Like I'm selling myself, or like you're being smart and using his privilege to help our kids." Monica's voice softened. "You remember Miguel, the kid who aged out of foster care last year?" Everly nodded. Miguel had been one of their success stories, now attending community college. "He told me once that pride doesn't keep you warm at night. Sometimes we have to play the game to change it." Before Everly could respond, her phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Everly Bennet speaking. "Ms. Bennet?" Lysander's voice sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I trust you've had time to consider my offer." She caught her reflection in the window, tired eyes, determined set of her jaw. "I have, and I have conditions." A pause, then a low chuckle. "I expected nothing less. Dinner tonight, 8 o'clock, Le Bernardin. We can discuss terms. Mr. Sterling." "Lysander, please. If we're going to be seen together, we should at least be on first-name terms." After hanging up, Everly turned to find Monica grinning. "Girl, you better let me help you get ready." 6 hours later, Everly stepped into Le Bernardin, her heart racing beneath her favorite navy cocktail dress. The maitre d' led her through the elegant restaurant to a private dining room, where Lysander waited. He stood as she entered, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Appreciation, perhaps, or surprise. His Tom Ford suit was impeccable as always, but tonight there was something different about him, a hint of vulnerability beneath the polished exterior. "You look stunning," he said simply, pulling out her chair. "Thank you." She sat, careful to maintain her composure. "Shall we discuss terms? Always straight to business." He smiled, pouring her a glass of wine. "Very well. Your conditions. The money goes directly to the center, through proper legal channels. I want everything transparent and above board." "Done." He didn't even hesitate. "What else?" "No physical contact beyond what's necessary for appearances. No implications of anything. Intimate. Naturally." His grey-blue eyes held hers. "Sir, though you should know there might be dancing at the gala." "I can handle a waltz, Mr. Sterling." "Lysander," he corrected gently. "And I'm sure you can handle many things, Everly. That's precisely why we're here." The waiter arrived with their first course, and Everly used the interruption to gather her thoughts. The food was exquisite, tender scallops with delicate truffle sauce, but she barely tasted it. "Sarah, there's something else you should know," Lysander said after a while. "Nathaniel Vance will be at the gala. Should I know that name? He's my chief competitor. Brilliant, charming, and utterly ruthless." Lysander's jaw tightened. "He has a habit of taking things that interest me." "I'm not a thing to be taken, Lysander." His eyes softened fractionally. "No, you're not. But Nathaniel won't see it that way. He'll see you as a way to get to me." "Then why invite this complication? Surely there are other events or—" "Because this gala is where decisions are made, alliances formed. The future of my company could depend on the impression we make." The weight of his words settled over her. This wasn't just about appearance, it was about power, influence, and games she didn't fully understand. "Tell me about him," she said finally. "What should I expect? Imagine a snake wearing Dior Sauvage and $1 million smile. He'll try to charm you, to make you doubt everything about me and this arrangement. You don't trust me. I don't trust him." Lysander leaned forward, his cologne teasing her senses. "Nathaniel has a talent for finding people's weaknesses, and right now, Everly, you might be mine." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to explore. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're walking into." He sat back, signaling for another bottle of wine. "And because I suspect you're like me, you prefer to face your battles with open eyes." Later that night, as her taxi wound through the rain-slicked streets of Brooklyn, Everly's mind raced. She'd agreed to his terms, signed the contracts he'd somehow had ready. Everything was legal, clear, protected by confidentiality agreements that would make Fort Knox look accessible. But it wasn't the contract that kept her awake that night. It was the way Lysander's mask had slipped, just for a moment, when he'd helped her with her coat. The gentle brush of his fingers against her shoulder, the subtle intake of breath when she'd turned to thank him. In her tiny apartment, Everly kicked off her heels and pulled out her journal. The pages were filling up with questions she couldn't answer, feelings she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sweet dreams, Ms. Bennett. The game begins tomorrow. N.V." Everly stared at the message, her pulse quickening. Nathaniel Vance, how had he gotten her number? More importantly, why was he already making moves in a game she barely understood? She thought of Lysander's warning, of the children who needed the community center, of the thin line she was walking between pragmatism and principle. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain hammering against her windows like nature's own warning. But Everly Bennett had made her choice. Now she just had to survive the consequences. She texted back a single word: "Good night. Let Nathaniel Vance play his games." She had 5 million reasons to stay focused, and one man's grey-blue eyes to avoid getting lost in. Tomorrow, she would start learning the rules of their dangerous game. Tonight, she would dream of children's laughter in a community center that was no longer just a fantasy, and maybe, just maybe, of the way Lysander Sterling looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. "Hold still," Monica insisted, adjusting the hem of the midnight blue gown that had arrived at Everly's apartment that morning. The dress was a masterpiece of subtle elegance, fitted through the bodice before flowing into a gentle sweep of fabric that moved like water when she walked. Girl, I don't care what you say about this being just business. The man has taste. Everly studied her reflection in the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly, as if it had been crafted specifically for her curves. A note had accompanied the delivery, for tonight's practice run. L.S. Practice run. The words still made her stomach twist. Lysander had insisted they attend a smaller charity dinner before the gala to establish their dynamic in public. 3 days of intensive coaching on upper-class social protocols had left her head spinning with rules about everything from wine selection to conversation topics. "You're overthinking again," Monica observed, arranging Everly's curls into an elegant updo. "I can see it in your eyes. I feel like I'm preparing for an undercover mission, not a dinner." Everly touched the delicate diamond earrings, another delivery from Lysander. "What if I mess this up?" "You won't." Monica stepped back, admiring her handiwork. "Just remember what your mama always said. Hold your head high and let them wonder what you know that they don't." A soft knock interrupted them. Lysander's driver was right on time. The restaurant, an exclusive spot in Upper Manhattan, glowed with warmth against the twilight sky. Lysander waited at the entrance, his tall frame impossibly elegant in a black suit that probably cost more than Everly's annual salary. When he saw her, something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes that made her breath catch. "You look—" He paused, searching for words. "Perfect, thank you." She accepted his offered arm, noting how naturally they fit together. "Though I still think this practice dinner is excessive. In my world, nothing is excessive when it comes to preparation." He led her inside, his hand warm against her lower back. "Besides, I thought you might appreciate a trial run before throwing you to the wolves." The maitre d' guided them to a private corner table with a view of both the restaurant and the city beyond. Lysander pulled out her chair with practiced grace, and Everly caught a whiff of his cologne, that now familiar scent that somehow made her feel both alert and at ease. "Wine," he offered, studying the list. "You choose. Apparently, that's more appropriate for our narrative." A small smile played at his lips. "You're a quick study. I have a good teacher." She met his gaze. "Though I'm still not clear on all the rules of engagement." "Simple." He ordered a bottle of Bordeaux with perfect pronunciation. "We've been dating quietly for 3 months. Met through mutual friends at a charity event. Keep it vague, but believable. And when people ask about my work, tell the truth." His eyes held hers. "Your passion for social work is exactly what makes you valuable in this charade. These people donate millions to feel good about themselves. Show them what real impact looks like." The wine arrived, and Lysander went through the tasting ritual with practiced ease. Everly watched his hands, strong, elegant, always in control, until they weren't. "He's here," Lysander said quietly, his fingers tightening almost imperceptibly on his glass. Everly didn't need to ask who. The shift in energy was palpable as Nathaniel Vance entered the restaurant. He moved like a man who owned every room he walked into, his casual confidence a striking contrast to Lysander's controlled power. "Well, well." Nathaniel's voice was smooth as aged whiskey as he approached their table. Lysander Sterling, breaking his own rules about mixing business with pleasure. "Nathaniel." Lysander's tone could have frozen champagne. "I wasn't aware you frequented this establishment. I follow interesting opportunities." Nathaniel's green eyes fixed on Everly, gleaming with predatory interest. "And you must be the lovely Miss Bennet. Your reputation precedes you." "Does it?" Everly kept her voice cool. "Funny, I wasn't aware social workers had reputations in your circles." Nathaniel laughed, genuine delight dancing in his eyes. "Oh, I like her, Lysander. No wonder you're breaking all your careful rules." He pulled a business card from his jacket, Dior, not Tom Ford, and placed it beside her wine glass. "When you tire of playing pretend with him, call me. I have some ideas about your community center that might interest you." "That won't be necessary," Lysander cut in, but Nathaniel was already turning away. "Enjoy your evening, lovebirds." "And Lysander," he paused, that dangerous smile still in place. "Tear the Tokyo deal. Better check your numbers again." They watched him weave through the restaurant, stopping to charm various diners with practiced ease. The scent of his Dior Sauvage lingered, clashing with Lysander's Oud Wood like competing claims to territory. "What did he mean about Tokyo?" Everly asked quietly. Lysander's jaw clenched. "Nothing you need to worry about. If it affects our arrangement, it doesn't." He took a long sip of wine. Nathaniel enjoys playing games. Don't let him get into your head. But he was already there, wasn't he? His card seemed to burn against the white tablecloth, a temptation and a threat wrapped in expensive paper. The rest of dinner passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of small talk and subtle touches. Lysander's hand would brush hers when reaching for the wine. His fingers would ghost against her back when helping her stand. Each contact sent little sparks of electricity through her skin, and Everly couldn't tell if it was part of the act or something more dangerous. Later, in his car, the city lights painted patterns across their faces. "You did well tonight," Lysander said softly, even with Nathaniel's interruption. "Is it always like this? Everyone watching, measuring, looking for weaknesses?" "Yes." He turned to face her, his profile sharp against the night. "Having second thoughts?" "No." The answer came too quickly, too firmly. "The center needs this money. I can handle your world for a few weeks." "Can you?" His voice was low, intimate in the dark car. "Because Nathaniel was right about one thing. I am breaking my rules with you." "Why?" The car stopped in front of her building, but neither moved to leave. Rain had started falling, drops racing down the windows like tears. "Because sometimes the most valuable things are the ones we never meant to acquire." He reached out, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. The touch lingered, warm against her skin. "Good night, Everly." She watched his car disappear into the Brooklyn night, her heart racing beneath the borrowed diamonds and designer dress. Inside her apartment, she carefully hung up the gown and changed into her favorite oversized NYU sweatshirt. The business card sat on her kitchen counter, elegant black letters seeming to mock her. Nathaniel's words echoed in her mind. "When you tire of playing pretend." But that was the problem, wasn't it? With every passing moment, this felt less like pretend and more like something terrifyingly real. Everly opened her journal, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself touching her cheek where Lysander's fingers had been, remembering the way his eyes had darkened when Nathaniel approached, the protective shift of his body toward hers. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Sweet dreams, Ms. Bennett. You looked ravishing in blue. N.V." Seconds later, another message. "Thank you for tonight. The gala won't know what hit them. L.S." 2 men, 2 messages, 2 very different games being played. And somewhere in the middle, Everly Bennett was starting to forget the rules she'd so carefully set for herself. She closed her journal without writing a word. Sometimes, silence said more than any confession could. The Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed like a palace of dreams against the Manhattan skyline. Everly stood at the top of the grand staircase, her heart thundering beneath the custom Oscar de la Renta gown Lysander had sent over. The dress was a masterpiece in deep burgundy, with intricate beading that caught the light with every movement. Her curls were swept up elegantly, diamond drops at her ears catching the warm light. "Breathe," Lysander murmured beside her, his hand warm against her lower back. "You look stunning." She turned to study him, immaculate in his tuxedo, the subtle platinum cufflinks catching the light. But something was off. His jaw was too tight, his shoulders too tense. "The Tokyo deal?" she whispered. A muscle twitched in his cheek. Let's just say Nathaniel's warning wasn't entirely baseless. Before she could press further, they were swept into the gala. The great hall had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale, with crystal chandeliers casting golden light over New York's elite. The air was thick with expensive perfumes, power plays, and secrets. Lysander, an elegant woman in her 60s, approached, dripping in family diamonds. "You've been holding out on us, darling. Who is this enchanting creature?" "Mrs. Ashworth." Lysander's smile was perfect, practiced. "Allow me to introduce Everly Bennett. Everly Margaret Ashworth sits on the board of several major charitable foundations." Everly felt the woman's shrewd assessment behind her social smile. This was it, the first test. I understand you work in social services." Mrs. Ashworth's tone carried a hint of surprise. "Yes, I do." Everly lifted her chin slightly. "Currently, I'm developing a comprehensive community center project in Brooklyn. We're focusing on after-school programs, job training for parents key, and mental health support." Mrs. Ashworth's eyes sharpened with interest. "Mental health support? That's become quite a pressing issue, hasn't it? Tell me more." For the next 20 minutes, Everly found herself in an intense discussion about community intervention strategies. She could feel Lysander watching her, pride and something else flickering in his eyes. "Magnificent, isn't she?" A familiar voice cut through their conversation. Nathaniel Vance appeared as if conjured, devastating in a midnight blue tuxedo. "Mrs. Ashworth, I hope you don't mind if I borrow this vision for a dance." Before anyone could object, Nathaniel had swept Everly onto the dance floor, his Dior Sauvage cologne wrapped around her like a seductive warning. "You clean up nicely, Ms. Bennett." His hand was firm on her waist as they moved to the waltz, though I suspect our friend Lysander had something to do with that. "What do you want, Mr. Vance?" "Direct. I like that." His green eyes glittered. "Thus, what if I told you I could offer your center twice what Lysander's offering? No strings attached, no fake dating required." Everly's step faltered slightly. "Why would you do that?" "Because watching Lysander lose something he wants would be worth every penny." Nathaniel's smile was razor-sharp. "You see, I know something about the Tokyo deal that's going to destroy him. By this time next week, Sterling Enterprises will be in free fall. And you'll be collateral damage." "You're lying." "Am I?" He spun her elegantly, bringing her closer. "Check your phone. I just sent you proof." The music ended, and Nathaniel bowed with exaggerated courtesy. "Think about it. Beautiful. Tick-tock." Everly made her way to the ladies' room, her hands shaking as she checked her phone. The documents Nathaniel had sent made her blood run cold. Internal memos, financial projections, all pointing to a massive fraud in Sterling Enterprises, Tokyo expansion. When she emerged, Lysander was waiting. "Everything all right? We need to talk." She grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a quiet alcove. "The Tokyo deal. There's something wrong with the numbers, isn't there?" His face went still. "What did Nathaniel tell you?" "He showed me documents." "Lysander, if this is true, it's not what you think." He ran a hand through his hair, that nervous tell she'd come to recognize. "The discrepancy in the numbers. I've been trying to track down where the leak is coming from. Someone inside my company is working with Nathaniel." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it wasn't relevant to our arrangement." His voice turned cold. "Unless you're considering Nathaniel's offer." The accusation stung. "Don't you dare." "I agreed to this because I believed in what the money could do for my kids. But if that money comes from fraud..." "It doesn't." Lysander stepped closer, his cologne surrounding her. "Everything I've built, everything I am, is based on one principle. I don't cheat. Nathaniel's the one playing games." Their eyes locked, electricity crackling in the small space between them. For a moment, Everly thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her. Despite everything, a throat cleared behind them. They turned to find Mrs. Ashworth watching with knowing eyes. "Sorry to interrupt, dears, but Lysander, the director is asking for you. Something about the Tokyo announcement." Lysander's face hardened. "Of course. Everly, will you..." "Go." She forced a smile. "I'll be fine." But as she watched him walk away, Nathaniel's words echoed in her mind. Collateral damage. The next hour passed in a blur of forced smiles and careful conversations. Everly found herself on the balcony, needing air, when a commotion erupted inside. Through the glass doors, she saw Lysander and Nathaniel in what appeared to be a heated discussion, surrounded by concerned-looking board members. Her phone buzzed. "Time's up, beautiful. Watch the fireworks." N.V. Seconds later, every phone in the room seemed to chime at once. The Tokyo documents had been leaked to the press. Everly watched in horror as Lysander's world began to crumble in real time. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he spoke with board members, his hands clenched at his sides. When their eyes met across the room, she saw something she'd never expected to see in Lysander Sterling's face. Fear. Not of the scandal, not of the financial implications, but of losing her. She made her decision in that moment. To hell with contracts and arrangements. This wasn't about money anymore. Everly Bennett was going to save Lysander Sterling, whether he wanted her help or not. Moving through the crowd, she caught Nathaniel's eye. He raised his champagne glass in a mock toast, that predatory smile still in place. Let him play his games. She had learned from the best. After all, the night wasn't over yet, and neither was she. Dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscenely beautiful given the chaos of the past 12 hours. Everly hadn't slept. Her Oscar de la Renta gown lay draped over a chair in Lysander's penthouse office, replaced by clothes from the emergency kit Monica had insisted she keep at work. Black pants and a simple blouse that felt like armor in this glass and steel fortress. "Here." Lysander handed her a fresh cup of coffee. His tie loosened, jacket discarded hours ago. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but his voice remained steady. "The board meeting starts in an hour. Have you looked at the files I found? Everly gestured to her laptop, where she'd spent the night analyzing years of financial records. Her social work background had given her an unexpected advantage. She was used to finding patterns in chaos, following paper trails that others might miss. Yes, he leaned against his desk, running a hand through his disheveled hair. But I still don't understand why you're doing this. The contract is void now. The scandal killed any chance of the gala serving its purpose. Everly set down her coffee, meeting his tired eyes. Do you really think that's why I'm here? Something flickered across his face. Vulnerability, wonder, fear. Why are you here, Everly? Before she could answer, his office door burst open. A team of lawyers and executives poured in, led by Richard Maxwell, Sterling Enterprises, Chief Financial Officer. His face was ashen. The press is having a field day, Richard announced, tossing a tablet onto the desk. Headlines screamed about fraud and corruption. Nathaniel Vance is giving a statement in an hour. Of course he is. Lysander's voice was ice. He orchestrated this whole thing. I found something. Everly stood, pulling up files on the main screen. The Tokyo numbers don't add up, but not in the way Nathaniel's documents suggest. Look at these transactions. The room fell silent as she walked them through her discovery. Hundreds of tiny discrepancies, all pointing to one conclusion. Someone had been manipulating the books long before the Tokyo deal. These patterns, she explained, highlighting specific entries, they're similar to what we see in financial abuse cases. Someone's been siphoning funds, but they're making it look like systematic fraud to tank the company's reputation. Richard's face went from ashen to grey. The timestamps on these transactions, they all happened during system maintenance windows, when only senior IT and financial officers would have access. Lysander finished, his eyes narrowing. Like you, Richard. The CFO lunged for the door, but Lysander was faster. In seconds, security had Richard restrained. You were working with Nathaniel. It wasn't a question. How long? You don't understand. Richard spat. Vance offered me twice my salary, plus a percentage of Sterling Enterprises when he took over. All I had to do was plant the evidence. Everly watched Lysander's face, seeing the betrayal cut deep. These weren't just employees. These were people he'd trusted, people he'd built his empire with. Get him out of here, Lysander ordered, and call our friends at the SEC. They'll want to see this. As the room cleared, Everly felt exhaustion hit her like a wave. She'd been running on adrenaline and coffee, driven by something she wasn't ready to name. You're remarkable. Lysander's voice was soft behind her. I have a team of financial analysts who missed what you found in one night. I'm good at seeing patterns. In my work, missing details can mean a child stays in a dangerous situation. She turned to face him. But you still haven't answered my question from the gala. Why didn't you tell me about the Tokyo situation? He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, faded now but still distinctly him. Because I've spent my entire life keeping people at arm's length. It's safer that way. No attachments, no vulnerabilities. How's that working out for you? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not as well as I'd hoped. Especially since a certain social worker walked into my office and turned everything upside down. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the subtle gold threads in his hair. Everly was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, of the electricity that seemed to crackle in the air between them. Lysander, she started, but his phone buzzed. A news alert. Nathaniel Vance was on live TV, looking polished and concerned as he spoke about troubling allegations aimed at Sterling Enterprises. That snake, Lysander's jaw clenched. He's trying to get ahead of the story. Then let's beat him at his own game. Everly pulled up her phone, dialing a familiar number. Monica, remember that journalist you dated last summer? The one at the Wall Street Journal? We need a favor. Within hours, the true story broke. Evidence of Richard's embezzlement, his connection to Vance Industries, the elaborate scheme to destabilize Sterling Enterprises, it all came to light. Nathaniel's carefully crafted press conference backfired spectacularly. By sunset, Sterling Enterprises' stock had stabilized. The board issued a statement of full confidence in Lysander's leadership. The Tokyo deal was safe. Everly stood at the office windows, watching the city lights blink to life. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind was still racing. Have dinner with me, Lysander said suddenly. She turned, surprised. What? Not as part of any contract. Not for show. He stepped closer, and this time there was no hesitation in his voice. Have dinner with me because I want to know you, The real you, not the version I tried to buy. I'm still wearing yesterday's makeup, I haven't slept in 36 hours, and I'm pretty sure my hair is defying gravity at this point. You're beautiful. The words were simple, sincere, and you saved everything I've built. Let me thank you properly. I didn't do it for thanks. I know. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. That's exactly why I'm asking. Before she could answer, her phone chimed with a text. This isn't over, beautiful. Round one goes to you, but I play the long game. NV. Lysander read the message over her shoulder, his grip tightening on her hand. He won't stop. Good. Everly met his surprised look with a smile. Because neither will we. We? Yes, we. She squeezed his hand. Sabbath first, I need a shower, clean clothes, and about 12 hours of sleep. After that, dinner sounds perfect. He laughed. A real laugh. Warm and unguarded. I can work with that. As they rode the elevator down to his waiting car, Everly thought about how much had changed in just a few days. She'd walked into this building hoping to save her community center. Instead, she'd found herself entangled in corporate intrigue, multi-million-dollar scandals, and something that felt dangerously like falling in love. Her phone buzzed again. Monica this time. Girl, you're all over the news. Call me ASAP. P.S. Does this mean you get to keep the designer dresses? Everly smiled, leaning slightly against Lysander's solid warmth beside her. The dresses were the least interesting thing she'd gotten out of this arrangement. But that was a story for another day. You can't be serious. Everly stared at the magazine cover displayed on her office computer. The photo showed her and Lysander leaving his office building the morning after the gala, his hand protectively at her back. The headline read, Love Conquers Wall Street, the romance behind Sterling Enterprises, Salvation. Monica leaned over her shoulder, grinning. Girl, you look good for someone who hadn't slept in 36 hours. But more importantly, Spill, it's been 2 weeks since the scandal. What's really going on with you and Mr. Tall, Rich and Handsome? Everly closed the browser, but couldn't hide her smile. The past 2 weeks had been unexpected. After that first real dinner, where they'd talked for hours about everything from their childhoods to their dreams, something had shifted between them. The pretense had fallen away, leaving something raw and genuine in its place. We're taking things slow, she said finally. Learning who we are without contracts and corporate drama between us. Slow, Monica arched an eyebrow. Is that why you've been coming to work glowing like a Christmas tree every morning? Before Everly could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Lysander. Free for lunch. There's something I need to show you. Her heart did a little flip. Rain check on the interrogation, she asked Monica. Duty calls. Oh, is that what we're calling it now? Everly grabbed her bag, pointedly ignoring her friend's knowing smirk. Outside, Lysander's car waited at the curb, but he wasn't in it. Instead, his driver handed her an envelope containing an address in Brooklyn and a simple note, Meet me there, L. The address led her to a rundown building a few blocks from her office. Yellow construction tape decorated the entrance, and the windows were covered in brown paper. Confusion settled in her stomach as she checked the address again. What do you think? Lysander's voice came from behind her. He wore a casual sweater and slacks today, his version of dressed down, but somehow looked even more handsome than in his usual suits. About an abandoned building, his eyes sparkled with something that looked suspiciously like excitement. I looked closer. Everly studied the building again, noting its location, the size, the potential. Realization hit her like a thunderbolt. This is 3 blocks from the youth center, she breathed. Perfect walking distance for after-school programs. The paperwork went through this morning. He pulled out a set of keys. It's yours, or rather, it's the community center's. Consider it a proper investment in the future of Brooklyn's youth. Emotion closed her throat. This wasn't just a building. It was everything she'd dreamed of for her kids. Lysander, I can't. Yes, you can. He stepped closer, his cologne wrapping around her like a caress. You saved my company, Everly. Let me help you build something too. She looked up at him, seeing past the powerful CEO to the man who'd been watching her, learning her dreams without her even realizing it. This isn't because you feel obligated, is it? This is because He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Because you make me want to be better. Do better. The kiss happened naturally, like breathing. His hands cradled her face as though she were precious, breakable. She tasted coffee and mint and possibility on his lips. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. Have dinner with me tonight, he murmured. At my place. I want to show you something else. More surprises. Always. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. That afternoon, as Everly was reviewing renovation proposals for the new building, Monica burst into her office. Turn on the news. Now, the headline made her blood run cold. Breaking: Sterling Enterprises accused of systematic discrimination in housing projects. Her phone exploded with notifications, leaked emails, doctored statistics, and testimony from anonymous sources painted a damning picture of discriminatory practices in Sterling's real estate division. At the center of it all was a familiar face, Nathaniel Vance, expressing his deep concern about the allegations. "They thought this is nonsense," Everly muttered, scanning the reports. "I've seen Lysander's development plans. They're specifically designed to prevent gentrification and protect diverse communities." "Maybe," Monica said quietly, "but perception is reality in the media, and right now the perception is ugly." Everly's phone rang. Lysander's private line. "Turn on the news," she said immediately. "Already saw it." His voice was tight with controlled fury. "And this is Nathaniel's revenge play. He's trying to hit me where it hurts most, my reputation for ethical business practices. And my community center," Everly realized. "If Sterling Enterprises is accused of discrimination, any connection to a social services project would taint everything you're trying to build." He exhaled slowly. "I'm so sorry, Everly. I never meant to drag you into this." "Hey," she made her voice firm. "We're in this together, remember? Now tell me what you need." A pause, then, "Come to my office. Bring any documentation you have about Sterling's development projects in minority communities. We're going to fight back." "On my way." She hung up and turned to Monica. "I need every contact you have in community organizing. If Nathaniel wants to talk about discrimination, let's show him what real community support looks like." Already texting them. Monica's fingers flew over her phone. "But girl, be careful. Men like Nathaniel Vance don't play fair. Neither do I. Not anymore." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Everly coordinated with community leaders, while Lysander's team assembled evidence of Sterling Enterprises' ethical development practices. But something nagged at her, a pattern in the leaked documents that felt familiar. She was reviewing security footage from Sterling's IT department when she saw it, a familiar face entering the building late at night, using Richard Maxwell's old security codes. "Found you," she whispered, freezing the frame on a woman she recognized from the gala, Cassandra Wells, Nathaniel's executive assistant, and Richard's former fiancée. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Dinner's cancelled, I assume. Such a shame. I had something special planned. N.V." Another message followed immediately. "Check your email, beautiful. You might find tonight's headline interesting." Everly's hands shook as she opened her email. There it was, proof that Nathaniel had orchestrated everything, including Richard's embezzlement. But attached was something else, photos of her and Lysander from the past 2 weeks, intimate moments they thought were private, a clear threat. She stared at her phone, anger replacing fear. Nathaniel thought he could threaten her. He had no idea what she was capable of. "Game on," she texted back. Tonight's dinner might be cancelled, but Everly had other plans. It was time to show Nathaniel Vance that he wasn't the only one who could play the long game. And this time, she had something he didn't. A man worth fighting for and a cause worth protecting. Let him play his games. She had learned from the best, after all. The real question wasn't whether she would win. The question was what Nathaniel would lose in the process. Cassandra Wells had expensive taste in coffee. Everly watched from a corner table at the upscale Manhattan cafe as Nathaniel's executive assistant ordered her usual complicated drink. 3 weeks of surveillance had revealed Cassandra's predictable morning routine, a pattern that would finally prove useful. "Are you sure about this?" Monica's voice crackled through Everly's earpiece. Her friend was stationed outside, watching for any signs of Nathaniel or his security. "No," Everly admitted quietly, "but it's our best shot." She'd spent the past week building this moment, laying the groundwork with careful precision. The discrimination allegations against Sterling Enterprises had taken their toll. Stock prices were down, community leaders were asking questions, and the press was having a field day. But Everly had learned a few things about power plays. She stood, smoothing her navy pencil skirt, and approached Cassandra's table. "Mind if I join you?" Cassandra's perfectly maintained smile faltered. "Ms. Bennett, I don't think that your relationship with Richard Maxwell would ever come to light." Everly sat down, placing a thick envelope on the table. Or that anyone would notice your late-night visits to Sterling Enterprises using his security codes. Color drained from Cassandra's face. I don't know what you're talking about. No. Everly slid a photo across the table, security footage showing Cassandra entering the building the night before the Tokyo scandal broke. Let's talk about loyalty, Cassandra, and what happens when we put it in the wrong people. Meanwhile, across town, Lysander was having a different kind of conversation. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom felt colder than usual as he faced his directors. The discrimination allegations are baseless, he stated, his voice carrying the authority that had built his empire. But perception matters. That's why I've called this meeting. He nodded to his assistant, who distributed thick folders to each board member. These are the complete records of every Sterling development project from the past 5 years. Demographics, community impact studies, local business preservation initiatives, everything. This is comprehensive, Margaret Ashworth noted, flipping through the pages. But will it be enough to counter Vance's narrative? Lysander allowed himself a small smile. That's just the beginning. Back at the cafe, Everly watched emotion flicker across Cassandra's face. Nathaniel will destroy me if I help you. No, Everly leaned forward. He'll destroy you when you're no longer useful, just like he did to Richard. Just like he's tried to do to everyone who trusts him. She pulled out her phone, showing Cassandra another set of photos, this time of Nathaniel with various women, all bearing striking resemblances to Cassandra herself. You're not the first assistant he's manipulated, Everly said softly, and you won't be the last, unless you help me stop him. Cassandra's hands trembled around her coffee cup. What do you want? Everything. Emails, recordings, proof of how he orchestrated both scandals. I know you keep records, Cassandra. Smart women always do. A tear slipped down Cassandra's cheek. He'll come after me. No, he won't. Everly reached across the table, squeezing the other woman's hand. Because Lysander Sterling protects his people, even those who made mistakes. Hours later, Everly sat in Lysander's penthouse office, watching the sun set over Manhattan. The evidence Cassandra had provided was damning. Years of Nathaniel's manipulations, all meticulously documented by an assistant he'd underestimated. You're incredible. Lysander's voice was soft as he joined her at the window. Dangerous, but incredible. She turned to face him, taking in the way his shirt sleeves were rolled up, his tie loosened after a day of battle. So having second thoughts about getting involved with me, only about not doing it sooner. He stepped closer, his cologne wrapping around her like a caress. The press conference is set for tomorrow morning. Once we release Cassandra's evidence, Nathaniel's finished. Everly nodded. But that's not what's really bothering you, is it? Lysander was quiet for a moment, his grey-blue eyes troubled. Duas, I watched you today, working to save my company, protect Cassandra, coordinate with the community leaders. You're extraordinary, Everly, and I can't help wondering if I deserve any of this. Hey, she reached up, touching his face gently. You're not the man Nathaniel tried to paint you as. I've seen your heart, Lysander. In the community center, in how you treated Cassandra, in every quiet moment when you think no one's watching. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Stay with me tonight. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. This wasn't about strategy or scandal anymore. This was about them, the real them, stripped of all pretense. We still have work to do, she whispered, but her resolve was weakening as he pulled her closer. It can wait. His lips found her neck, and Everly's world narrowed to the sensation of his touch. Everything else can wait. But the universe had other plans. Her phone buzzed urgently, Monica's emergency tone. The message made her blood run cold. Turn on the news now. Nathaniel just announced his engagement to Cassandra. No, Everly breathed, reaching for the remote. There it was, Nathaniel and Cassandra on every channel, looking perfectly in love as he slipped a massive diamond ring on her finger. A source close to the couple confirms this isn't a sudden decision, the reporter announced. They've been secretly dating for months, making Ms. Wells's testimony about Sterling Enterprises' ethical violations even more credible. Lysander's jaw clenched. He knew. Somehow he knew we'd approached her. No. Everly stared at the screen, watching Cassandra's performance. Something was off about her smile, her posture. This isn't a counter-move. This is a cry for help. She grabbed her phone, dialing rapidly. Monica, get me everything you can on Nathaniel's previous relationships, plus any domestic incident reports, restraining orders, everything. Cassandra's not just his pawn, she's his prisoner. Lysander watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. What are you thinking? I'm thinking. Everly met his eyes, fierce determination burning in her chest. That it's time to change the game. No more corporate tactics. No more polite power plays. She pulled up another number, Margaret Ashworth's private line. If Nathaniel wants to make this personal, let's get personal. I know some domestic violence advocates who would be very interested in his pattern of behavior. Everly, Lysander's voice was soft but urgent. This could get dangerous. I know, she squared her shoulders, but I've spent my career protecting people from men like him. I'm not stopping now. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. What do you need from me? Your trust, and maybe your private security team. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You've had both for longer than you know. Outside, the city lights blinked on one by one, like stars being born in an urban sky. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new strategies, new risks. But tonight, in this moment, Everly knew one thing with absolute certainty. Love wasn't a weakness Nathaniel could exploit. It was the strength that would finally bring him down. The manila folder landed on Everly's desk with a heavy thud. Monica stood over it, her usual smile replaced by grim determination. 5 women, she said quietly, all former assistants or girlfriends of Nathaniel Vance, all with similar stories, and all too terrified to come forward. Everly opened the folder, her heart sinking as she read. The pattern was clear. Young, ambitious women drawn into Nathaniel's orbit, isolated from friends and family, then controlled through a combination of career opportunities and subtle threats. This one. Monica pointed to a photo of a woman with haunting eyes. Olivia Richardson. She was his assistant 3 years ago. Now she's working at a women's shelter in Boston, helping others escape exactly what she went through. Have you contacted her? She's willing to talk, but only in person, and only to you. Everly checked her watch. The morning sun was just starting to paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold and promise. Book me on the next train to Boston. Already did. Monica handed her a ticket. But girl, you need to tell him. As if summoned by their conversation, Everly's phone lit up with Lysander's name. Her heart did that familiar flip it always did now, even as worry gnawed at her stomach. Good morning? His voice was warm through the speaker. Have you seen today's stock reports? No, I've been focused on other research. A pause. The Cassandra situation. Lysander. Everly closed her eyes, gathering courage. I'm going to Boston today. There's someone I need to talk to about Nathaniel. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken concern. Let me send security with you. That would only draw attention. I need to do this quietly. Everly. His voice dropped lower, intense. Nathaniel's been watching your apartment. My team spotted his car there last night. A chill ran down her spine, but she forced her voice to stay steady. All the more reason to move quickly. The engagement announcement is buying us time, but Cassandra's running out of it. At least let me have the company jet ready. If anything feels wrong, I'll call. I promise. She softened her tone. Trust me, Lysander. This is what I do. I help people escape men like him. I do trust you. The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning. Just come back to me. The raw emotion in his voice made her breath catch. Always. 4 hours later, Everly sat in a quiet Boston cafe watching Olivia Richardson stir her untouched tea. The woman was elegant, but tense, like a deer ready to bolt. He's smarter now, Olivia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. With me, he was still learning his technique. The physical bruises, they were too obvious. Now he leaves marks no one can see. The evidence you kept. Everly leaned forward. Would you be willing to share it? Olivia's hands trembled. He'll know it was me. No, he won't, because we're not just building a case against him. We're building a movement. Everly pulled out her phone, showing Olivia the private social media group they'd created. Look how many women have already joined, all sharing similar stories. But none have gone public. They will. Together. Strength in numbers. Olivia. He can't silence us all. Before Olivia could respond, Everly's phone buzzed with an urgent text from Monica. 911. Cassandra, in hospital. Accident. At Vance Tower. I have to go. Everly stood quickly. But Olivia, think about what I said. You're not alone anymore. The train ride back to New York was agony. Every minute felt like an hour, as Everly coordinated with Monica, women's advocacy groups, and Lysander's legal team. By the time she reached Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital, A plan was forming. She found Cassandra in a private room, her elegant features marred by a fall that had left suspicious bruises. Nathaniel had already spun the story to the press. A tragic accident, his beloved fiancée tripping on stairs in her high heels. "He knows," Cassandra whispered when they were alone, "about our meeting, about everything. He said no one would believe me now, after the engagement announcement. He's wrong." Everly took her hand gently. "Look at your phone." Cassandra's eyes widened as she scrolled through the private group. Dozens of women, all sharing pieces of the same nightmare, all ready to stand together. "It's not just about Sterling Enterprises anymore," Everly explained. "This is about stopping him, permanently. Ms. Bennett." Nathaniel's voice cut through the room like ice. He stood in the doorway, impeccable in a designer suit that couldn't quite hide the predator beneath. "Visiting hours are over." "Actually," a new voice joined them, "they're not." Lysander filled the doorway behind Nathaniel, and he wasn't alone. Margaret Ashworth stood with him, along with a woman Everly recognized from the photos, another of Nathaniel's previous assistants. "Hello, Nathaniel." The woman's voice was steel. "Remember me?" Color drained from his face. "What is this?" "This," Everly stood, moving protectively in front of Cassandra's bed, "is what happens when you underestimate women who've had enough. You're making a mistake." Nathaniel's charm vanished, replaced by something dark and ugly. "All of you, I'll destroy." "No." Margaret's voice cut like a blade. "You won't. Because in about 30 seconds, every major news outlet will receive evidence of your pattern of abuse, financial manipulation, and corporate espionage. Your empire is built on sand, Nathaniel, and the tide just came in." As if on cue, phones throughout the hospital began buzzing. The story was breaking, and this time there would be no spinning it away. "Security will escort you out," Lysander said quietly. "I suggest you go quietly. Your lawyers will be busy enough as it is." Later, in Lysander's penthouse, Everly watched the news coverage with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. Women across the country were coming forward, sharing their stories of survival. "You did it," Lysander murmured, pulling her close. "We did it." She turned in his arms. "All those women, they just needed to know they weren't alone. Like someone else I know." His eyes held hers, full of pride and something deeper. "You know, when I first made that contract offer, I thought I was the one with all the power." Everly smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "And now I know that real power isn't about money or control." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "It's about having the courage to stand up for what's right. You taught me that." Outside, the city hummed with energy as the biggest scandal in recent memory unfolded. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the way Lysander looked at her, not as an investment or an asset, but as an equal, a partner, someone who had challenged everything he thought he knew about power and love. "Stay," he whispered against her hair. This time, Everly didn't hesitate. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't about winning games or making deals. Sometimes they were about finding the courage to let yourself fall, knowing someone would be there to catch you. And sometimes, just sometimes, love was the most powerful contract of all. Autumn painted Central Park in shades of gold and crimson as Everly walked its winding paths, her hand intertwined with Lysander's. 3 months had passed since Nathaniel's empire had crumbled, and the world felt different now, softer around the edges, yet somehow more real than ever. "Aren't nervous?" Lysander asked, squeezing her hand gently. "About opening the community center?" "Terrified," she smiled up at him. But the good kind of terrified. Tomorrow would mark the official opening of the Bennett Community Center. What had started as a desperate dream now stood as a beacon of hope in Brooklyn. A modern facility offering everything from after-school programs to job training, counseling services to adult education. "You know," Lysander mused, guiding her toward their favorite bench overlooking the lake, "when I first offered you that contract, I thought I was the one in control. And now?" Everly raised an eyebrow, enjoying the way sunlight caught the gold threads in his hair. "Now I know that some things can't be bought or controlled." He turned to face her, his grey-blue eyes intense. "Says some things can only be earned." A cool breeze carried the scent of his oud wood cologne, mixing with her Coco Mademoiselle in the autumn air. So much had changed since that first meeting in his office, yet their signature scents remained, a constant in a world of transformation. "Have you heard from Cassandra?" she asked, watching leaves dance across the path. "She's doing well in California. The women's advocacy group she started is gaining national attention. Pride colored his voice. The foundation's grant will help them expand to 3 more cities next year. The Sterling Bennett Foundation had been Lysander's idea, a way to systematically support survivors of domestic abuse while funding community development projects. It was also his way of ensuring that what happened to Nathaniel's victims would never happen again. And Nathaniel? The name no longer carried the weight it once did. Still fighting charges in 3 states, Lysander's jaw tightened slightly. But with the evidence Olivia and the others provided, he won't be walking away this time. They sat in comfortable silence, watching young couples row boats across the lake. Everly thought about all the lives that had changed in the past few months, not just hers and Lysander's, but Cassandra's, Olivia's, and countless others who had found their voice. Monica says the center already has a waiting list for programs, she said finally. We might need to expand sooner than we thought. Already taken care of. Lysander pulled out his phone, showing her blueprints for the building next door. The purchase goes through next week. Consider it an early Christmas present. Everly stared at him, emotion tightening her throat. You can't just buy buildings without consulting you. His eyes twinkled. Actually, I can, but only because I know you'll put them to better use than I ever could. You're impossible, but she was smiling as she said it. I prefer strategically generous. He tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his touch lingering. Speaking of strategy, move in with me. The words hung in the crisp autumn air. They'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks, both knowing it was coming but neither wanting to rush. Your penthouse is beautiful, Everly said carefully, but it's not home. I know. Lysander reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out another set of blueprints. That's why I bought us a brownstone in Brooklyn, walking distance from the center. Plenty of room for your mother's jazz collection and my ridiculous wine cellar. Everly's heart skipped. You'd leave Manhattan? I'd follow you anywhere. The simple honesty in his voice made her breath catch, but preferably somewhere within reasonable commuting distance of the office. She laughed, the sound bright in the autumn air. Always the pragmatist. Only about some things. He pulled her closer, his warmth chasing away the October chill. About others, I've learned to let my heart lead. A group of children ran past their bench, chasing fallen leaves and dreams only they could see. Everly watched them, thinking of the kids who would find new opportunities at the center. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. The brownstone, living together, building something real. She turned to face him fully. But I have conditions. A smile tugged at his lips. Of course you do. I keep my apartment above the center for late nights. The foundation expands its youth programs, and, she paused, gathering courage, you have to dance with me at the opening ceremony tomorrow. Even though I hate dancing in public, even though, he studied her face, love and amusement mingling in his expression. Counter-offer, I dance with you tomorrow, but you have to attend the Sterling Enterprises holiday gala as my date. No contract required. Deal. She sealed it with a kiss that tasted of possibility and promise. Later that evening, as they walked through their soon-to-be home, Everly marveled at how perfectly the space balanced their different worlds. The modern kitchen would satisfy Lysander's culinary perfectionism, while the cozy library seemed designed for her late-night reading habits. One more surprise, Lysander said, leading her to what would be their bedroom. Look up. The ceiling was a masterpiece of fiber-optic lights, creating a perfect replica of the night sky. For when you miss stargazing in Brooklyn, he explained softly. Emotion closed her throat. He'd remembered a throwaway comment from months ago about how she used to watch stars with her mother on their tiny apartment roof. I love you, she said, the words falling naturally from her lips. He stilled beside her, then pulled her into his arms. Say it again. I love you, Lysander Sterling. She smiled against his chest. Even when you're impossible. Especially then, he murmured into her hair. I love you too, Everly Bennett. Even when you're making me dance in public. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with its usual energy, sirens and laughter, dreams and determination. But here, in this moment, they had created their own world, a world where contracts had transformed into promises, where power meant having the strength to be vulnerable, and where love wasn't a transaction, but a gift freely given and gratefully received. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dreams to chase. But tonight, watching artificial stars twinkle above them, Everly and Lysander had found something better than success. They had found home. The Bennett Community Center gleamed in the morning sun, its renovated facade a testament to dreams made real. Everly stood in her new office, watching families stream through the doors for the grand opening. Children's laughter echoed through the halls, mixing with the excited chatter of parents and community members. "Everything's ready," Monica announced, appearing in the doorway. "Though I still can't believe you convinced Lysander Sterling to cut the ribbon in Brooklyn instead of having some fancy Manhattan ceremony." Everly smiled, adjusting her navy blazer, the same one she'd worn to that first meeting in his office, now feeling like a lifetime ago. "He's full of surprises." "Speaking of surprises," Monica handed her a small velvet box. "This was just delivered." The card says, "For new beginnings." Inside, nestled on black silk, lay a delicate gold necklace with a single perfect star pendant. Everly's heart squeezed as she read the note in Lysander's elegant handwriting. "Because you taught me to reach for the stars, even when they seemed impossible to grasp." A knock at the door interrupted her moment of emotion. Margaret Ashworth stood there, elegant as ever in Chanel. "The press is ready, dear. And you won't believe who just arrived." Everly followed Margaret to the main hall, where Cassandra Wells was greeting a group of women, all survivors, all standing tall. The former assistant had transformed in the months since leaving Nathaniel. California sunshine had given her a healthy glow, and her eyes held a confidence that no designer clothes could buy. "I wouldn't have missed this," Cassandra said, hugging Everly tightly. "Our foundation's West Coast chapter opens next month, you know. Full circle." The crowd parted, and Everly's breath caught. Lysander stood at the entrance, devastating in a perfectly tailored suit, but it was his expression that made her heart race. He looked at her the way dreamers looked at stars, with wonder, with certainty, with love. "Ready?" he asked softly when she reached him. "For a ribbon cutting." "I think I can handle that. Not just the ribbon cutting." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "For everything that comes after." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches and applause. Everly spoke about community, about hope, about the power of believing in something bigger than yourself. Lysander talked about investment in people, not just profits, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned that lesson firsthand. But it was the children's faces that Everly would remember most, their eyes wide with possibility as they explored the computer lab, the art studio, the library filled with books and dreams. "Miss Bennett," a small voice caught her attention. A girl, no more than 12, held out a handmade card. "Thank you for building this place. Mum says it means I can stay in the science program after school now." Everly knelt to the girl's level, emotion tightening her throat. "What's your name?" "Destiny." "Well, Destiny, I think you're going to do amazing things." She glanced up to find Lysander watching them, his eyes soft. "Sometimes all we need is a chance to prove what we're capable of." The afternoon flowed into evening, and the center hummed with activity. Community leaders mingled with corporate donors, social workers chatted with educators, and through it all, a sense of possibility filled the air. In a quiet moment, Everly slipped away to the rooftop garden, her favorite part of the renovation. The Brooklyn skyline spread before her, a tapestry of lights and dreams. "I thought I'd find you here." Lysander's voice was warm behind her. "Hiding from your own success?" "Not hiding." She turned to face him. "Just remembering. The night you came to my office. The night I learned that some things are worth more than pride." She touched the star pendant at her throat. "Some things are worth risking everything for." He moved closer, his cologne wrapping around her like a promise. "I have something to ask you. If it's about the holiday gala, I already picked out my dress." "Not about the gala." His eyes held hers. "Serious now. They're about forever." Time seemed to stop as he reached into his pocket, drawing out a small box that made her heart skip. The ring inside was perfect, a stunning star sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and breathtaking. "I had this whole speech prepared," he said softly, "about how you turned my world upside down, how you made me question everything I thought I knew about power and success. But standing here, seeing everything you've built, everything you are," he took a shaky breath, "the only words that matter are, I love you, Everly Bennett. Marry me." Below them, the city pulsed with life. Inside the center, children laughed and dreams took root. And here, under a sky turning purple with twilight, Everly looked at the man who had tried to buy her time and ended up giving her his heart instead. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." The kiss was sweet and sure, tasting of promise and possibility. When they parted, Lysander rested his forehead against hers. Dance with me. Here. Now. Why not? He pulled her close as music drifted up from the celebration below. We've never been good at following conventional rules anyway. They swayed together under the emerging stars, their story coming full circle on a Brooklyn rooftop. No contracts, no pretense, no games. Just two people who had found something real in a world of transactions and deals. Mrs. Ashworth is already planning the wedding, isn't she? Everly murmured against his chest. Probably, but we could always elope. She laughed, the sound pure joy. Lysander Sterling, suggesting something spontaneous. Who are you, and what have you done with my fiancé? Your fiancé, he repeated, as if tasting the words. I like how that sounds. Almost as much as I'm going to like calling you my husband. Later that night, they walked through their brownstone, still full of moving boxes and possibility. Everly's jazz collection had found a home next to Lysander's wine cellar. Their books mingled on shelves, and their dreams intertwined like the stars glittering on their bedroom ceiling. You know, Lysander said as they lay together, watching artificial constellations dance above them. That first contract was the best mistake I ever made. Mistake? She propped herself up to look at him. I thought I was buying time with a fascinating woman. His fingers traced patterns on her skin. Instead, I found the rest of my life. Everly kissed him softly, knowing that some things couldn't be captured in words. Some things could only be felt, lived, treasured. Outside, Brooklyn dreamed its endless dreams. Inside, two people who had started as business opponents had become partners in every way that mattered, and somewhere, in an office that started it all, a contract lay forgotten in a drawer, replaced by something far more valuable. A love story written in starlight and trust, in courage and choice, in the power of two hearts finding their way home. Not through obligation or arrangement, but through the simple, extraordinary miracle of falling in love. 1 year later, the Sterling Bennett Foundation's annual gala had a different energy than the corporate events Everly once dreaded. Children's artwork decorated the Metropolitan Museum's walls, displayed alongside priceless masterpieces. The guest list included not just New York's elite, but community leaders, educators, and survivors who had become advocates. Can you believe it's been a year? Monica asked, adjusting her emerald gown as they watched Lysander chat with a group of donors. He caught Everly's eye across the room, that private smile still making her heart skip. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Everly touched her star sapphire wedding ring, remembering their intimate ceremony in the community center's rooftop garden 6 months ago. The other times, it's like I've known him forever. The foundation had expanded beyond their wildest dreams, with centers now operating in 5 cities. Cassandra ran the West Coast division, turning her experience into a force for change. The newest project, a scholarship program for survivors' children, had launched last month to overwhelming support. Mrs. Sterling? A familiar small voice interrupted her thoughts. Destiny, the young girl from the center's opening, now stood taller in a pretty blue dress. I got accepted into the Science Magnet program. Everly hugged her tightly. That's wonderful, though you should still call me Everly. Old habits, Destiny grinned. Mr. Sterling says I might be running the foundation someday. He's probably right. Later that night, Everly and Lysander danced under the museum's soaring ceiling. His oud wood cologne mingled with her Coco Mademoiselle, their signature scents now a comfort rather than a challenge. Happy, he murmured against her hair. She smiled against his chest. Though we should tell them soon. His hand drifted to her stomach, still flat but harboring their newest dream. Tomorrow. Tonight is about celebrating how far we've come. Above them, through the museum's glass ceiling, real stars twinkled, witnesses to a love story that began with a contract and ended with forever. Some deals, after all, were written in the stars. The end. Based on this intense love story between Everly and Lysander, here's a question for reflection. If you were in Everly's shoes, would you accept $1 million contract from a powerful CEO to fake a relationship, even if it meant questioning your own principles? Or would you keep your values intact, even if it cost you the opportunity to help dozens of underprivileged children through the community center? Put yourself in this moral dilemma. What's worth more? Your personal integrity or the chance to make a real difference to other people's lives? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.